What's up everyone, I'm Jacob, also known as Jonesy, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about my Shiiga Turbo Draw deck. I just finished playing this deck in a webcam tournament on the nostalgix Discord, and if you have not watched the match videos yet, I'm going to give a brief recap over how it went. In match 1 against Pro Decimus, I lost the first game because my combo fizzled out and I wasn't able to draw enough draw spells to keep drawing through my deck. In the last two games, I was able to combo off, but in the second game, I did make a misplay, which I did not catch, and neither did my opponent, but fortunately, I had enough cards in hand where it wouldn't have actually impacted the winner of that game. In the second matchup against ZF Delta, I was able to win the first game, lose the second, and then combo off the third to win. And then in the third matchup, I ended up winning the first game against Ren from Ren's Collectibles, when he should have killed me since we miscalculated the damage that my New Game Plus had on his fighters. So after winning that, I won the second game and it was to clear the winner, although technically we're still 1-1. So if you want to see Ren and I have a grudge match, please leave a comment down below and let me know. Now, my main takeaways from the tournament are two things. One, this deck is a lot more complicated to play and a lot more intricate than I initially thought it would be. I mean, I knew it wouldn't be an easy deck to play. There are a lot of very difficult lines, especially when you have cards like Massive Effect, which cause you to discard 2 cards, and knowing what to discard and knowing the order on the draw spells you play, it's not super easy at times. There are other times where if you wanted to play a New Game Plus early, it can help you play a lot of extra spells. However, it also increases your opponent's clock against you, which is actually the reason why I should have lost my first game of the third match. The other main takeaway is that I definitely need to learn the deck better. Because it is so complicated, I definitely did not play it well, but that is one of the reasons why I recorded my matches, so I can look back at them and try to learn from my mistakes and become better with this deck. Now, in terms of what I would change about the deck, there are 6 cards in the main deck I plan on taking out next time I play this. The first one is the 4th copy of New Game Plus. I originally had 4 to worry about my opponent's other arenas, but most of my opponents weren't actually playing with arenas, so having the extra copy as an extra arena removal spell wasn't actually necessary, and I feel like you only need 3 in order for you to find 1. Next card I'm going to cut are 2 copies of Crowd Surf. I was not very impressed with this deck, just because there were more situations than I thought where I voided 2 cards that I needed, like extra copies of Wish Upon a Frog. Now, it is still a good card in the deck, won't happen every time, so I still have 2 copies in the main deck, but I'm taking out the 3rd and 4th ones. The next card, which I'm cutting, is Divine Blessing. This was part of my backup plan. In case I drew through my deck, I wasn't able to win on the spot, then my goal was just to loop Voidcast the Shiiga over and over again each turn, and try to stall out my opponent. I had Divine Blessing in because gaining health could help my hero stay alive, and because I also had Save the Day, which caused me to lose 5 health. So just 1 cast of this would help me regain all of the health I lost. The last 2 cards I'm cutting are Save the Day and Nope. Although I am moving these to the sideboard, in most of my matchups, these were not necessary. However, with more people becoming aware of the deck, I still think they are good to move to in the sideboard. Now, the 6 cards I'm adding into the deck, first off, I'm adding the 4th copy of Rewind Time. This card is absolutely amazing. Being able to return any of your voided spells to your hand is extremely useful during pretty much every single turn. If you need your extra copy of Wish Upon a Frog to combo off, it can help you return that. If you fizzled out on the draw spells, you can use Rewind Time to return a Frog of Greed or a Massive Effect to keep drawing spells. And if you've already drawn through your deck, you can use it to return a Voidcast to cast Gamatron Slice again. So having the 4th copy is absolutely needed in this deck. The next card I'm adding is the 4th copy of Energy Drink. Because I did actually add a few fighters in the deck, we no longer just have to rely on our opponent having fighters in order to play this card. So because of that, I'm adding the 4th card, and because there were a lot of situations where I would have rather had this as opposed to a Crowd Surf. The next card I'm adding is 1 copy of Witchy's Hat Drop. I thought about putting this somewhere in my main deck or my sideboard, and I realized quickly that it was a mistake, because there are some equipment cards which are big problems with this deck, mainly Laser Pointer. So having a way to destroy an equipment is definitely necessary in the main deck, as a one-of. The fact that I have to discard a hand isn't going to be a problem most of the time, because most of the time, once you draw through your deck, you're going to have some extra cards which you don't actually need anymore. And lastly, I'm adding 3 fighters to the deck. I'm adding 3 narwhals. This is a 3-mana fighter, and when you play it, your opponent cannot activate surprises in response to it, or during the first turn that this is in play. So, as long as we play this on the turn we're comboing off, we don't have to worry about any of our opponent's surprises. Now, I am still playing 1 reverse, because I feel like having the 1 reverse is going to be very useful in case we don't draw narwhal. I'm not sure how many narwhals are necessary. I don't think 4 is going to be needed, and while 2 might be fine, I'm going to start the next time I play this with 3 narwhals and try that out. Alright, now onto the changes in the sideboard. In the sideboard, I'm cutting 2 copies of Laser Barrier, mainly due to the fact that they cost 5 mana each. While it can buy you a turn, I don't think it's really going to save us from being killed, because if we're spending 5 mana just to delay 1 turn, I think I'd rather just play cards to try and find my extra combo pieces, instead of just taking off a turn just to play this and do nothing else. The other 2 cards on the sideboard I'm cutting are Frog of Duality. I usually put these in as a sideboard option in case I face up against the mirror match, but I do have a better option for the mirror match. Now, in the sideboard, I am keeping the 2 copies of Towerfall. They were very useful in one game that I played. The fact that they sweep your opponent's side of the field and you draw 2 cards is amazing, so I think 2 is the right number. And while I did not actually board in Chain Lightning at all, I still think the 2 copies are necessary in the sideboard. Because people are going to be more aware of this deck, they are going to be playing Unlucky Frog more often, at least as a sideboard option. So having this just for Unlucky Frog, I think, is necessary. Now, for the surprises, we have the 1 Save of the Day. We now have 2 Nopes, mostly to stop severe weather. I was worried about facing mill decks in the most recent webcam tourney, because there were a lot of people who wanted to try out mill decks, but didn't actually play any. But I still think 2 Nope decks are going to be necessary in the sideboard, and I have a 2nd copy of Reverse. Next up, I have 2 new cards to the sideboard. The first is 1 copy of Magnafox. Is a 3-mana fighter. When it comes into play, you equip any equipment that your opponent controls to this. So this is a 3-mana option of getting rid of our opponent's laser pointer in case they have it. I don't know if this is necessary, but I thought I needed a 2nd card besides my 1 Witchy's Hat drop in my main deck to deal with my opponent's equipment spells. And even though this isn't a spell, and I'm going to have to pay 3 mana for it every time I do it, the fact that it doesn't discard a card like Witchy's Hat drop is the reason why I'm playing it. And the last sideboard card is my new plan against the mirror match. In the mirror match, I'm going to sideboard out Shiiga and replace him with Brecon the Miner. Once per turn, Brecon lets you gain 1 temporary mana by losing 3 health. Because this deck does not deal any early damage in the mirror match, the life loss from Brecon won't actually help your opponent to kill you, and the extra mana will help you play your combo pieces first before your opponent. Now, before I end the video, I did want to highlight a few very good cards against this deck. The main one, which I've mentioned before, is Unlucky Frog. It's a 2-mana fighter, and if a player draws more than 1 card in a turn, your hero takes 1 damage for each card drawn past the first. If your opponent only has 1 of these in play, you still might be able to draw into a Voidcast and Divine Wrath before this kills you, but if your opponent has 2, then it's going to be a big problem, which is why we have the Chain Lightnings in the sideboard. The best surprise against us is Nope, which can counter our Wish Upon a Frogs. And in a lot of my games, my opponents had a chance to counter my Wish Upon a Frogs, but didn't, and decided to wait and counter my Voidcast instead. However, most of the time when you combo off, you're going to be able to play Gamatron Slice at least 4 times. So waiting to Nope Voidcast or Gamatron Slice is the wrong thing to do against this deck. You want to try to Nope and counter their Wish Upon a Frogs. The other surprise which can counter a Wish Upon a Frog is Mixtape. A Mixtape on 2 will counter it, otherwise if there's New Game Plus in play, Mixtape will have to be played for 1 mana. While you will have to guess the X cost of Mixtape when you play it, the fact that it will cost less mana than the Nope does make it a consideration. Even in the mirror match, because in the mirror match, you could potentially steal your opponent's Wish Upon a Frog and give yourself the permanent mana instead. The last surprise to watch out for is a random one. It is Nidahan. It's a 3-mana surprise. If your opponent doesn't attack by the end of their turn, you can activate this and cause either player to void their hand, and then that player draws 4 cards. If you play this on a Shiiga Turbo Draw deck, you might be able to force your opponent to discard all of the necessary combo pieces they're saving in hand. And while they do draw 4 cards, and they can still combo off with 4 new cards, chances are you're going to force them to discard something that they need. So this could be a very interesting option against them. Next up, we have Laser Pointer. This is a one-man equipment, and the target of this cannot be damaged by spells or hero abilities directly. So for only 1 mana, your opponent can stop you from Gamatron slicing their hero. This is the reason why we have the Witchy's Hat Drop and the Magnafox in the sideboard. And because it only costs 1 mana, I feel like it is going to be a very popular sideboard option against this deck. So make sure to be aware of that. Now the last cards to watch out for are basically any cards which can mill your opponent. So the Booster Box Dragon line, the Gidragon line, and Severe Weather. Any card which can cause you to mill cards is something to watch out for. Even though this deck does have rewind times to return the necessary combo pieces that get milled, I still think a milling strategy can be very effective against this deck, because if you do mill enough of their necessary cards, then they're not going to be able to combo off as easy as they normally would. So I am really curious about playing this deck against a Booster Box Dragon deck. So those are the changes I would make to Shiiga Turbo Draw, and a few of the cards to watch out for in case you want to play this deck yourself. Let me know down in the comments what you think the best card against this deck is. Thanks so much for watching everyone, and I will see you in the next video.